Number 1, the Baby Hope case. The story of Baby Hope is a heartbreaking one that started with the life of Angelica Castillo, a 4-year-old girl from a family of immigrants who lived in the Bronx. Angelica was one of 5 siblings and was known to be a shy, introverted child who had a love for music and dancing. In the summer of 1991, Angelica disappeared from her home, and her family never reported her missing. Several days later, Baby Hope's body was found by a passerby on July 23, 1991, in a cooler alongside the Henry Hudson Parkway in Washington Heights, Manhattan. The cooler was inside a plastic bag, and it had been thrown over a guardrail and down an embankment. The passerby who discovered the cooler initially thought it was a picnic cooler, but soon realized that it contained a human body. The police were called to the scene, and the investigation into Baby Hope's murder began. The child had been sexually abused and asphyxiated and had been dead for at least 2 days. Her body was unrecognizable, as her killers had gone to great lengths to prevent identification, even pouring bleach over her body. It's unclear why Angelica's parents didn't report her missing. For the next 22 years, investigators pursued every possible lead, including conducting countless interviews and exhuming the child's body in hopes of obtaining new forensic evidence. But despite their best efforts, they did not have any leads who had did this terrible crime, and the case remained unsolved. It wasn't until 2013 that a break in the case finally came. A tipster contacted police and provided them with a key piece of information. Angelica had a sister named Maribel. Detectives used this information to track down Maribel, who was living in Connecticut. Through Maribel, they were finally able to identify Angelica and her mother, who had fled to Mexico years earlier. With Angelica's identity finally known, investigators turned their attention to finding her killer. The break in the case came when investigators received a DNA match linking a man named Conrado Juarez, a cousin of Angelica, to the crime. Juarez had been just 30 years old at the time of the murder and was known to have been in the same apartment where Angelica had been living at the time of her death. In a stunning turn of events, Juarez confessed to killing Angelica after police presented him with evidence that linked him to the crime. Juarez's motive for the murder remains unclear. However, it is believed that he sexually assaulted Angelica before killing her. In a statement to police, Juarez said, "I hit her with my hands and I put a pillow on her face. I pressed hard until she couldn't breathe anymore." Juarez was convicted of second-degree murder in 2016 and sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The case of Baby Hope is a tragic one, but it also serves as a reminder of the dedication and persistence of law enforcement officers who worked tirelessly for over 2 decades to bring justice for a young child who had been lost and forgotten. Number 2, the case of Wendy Jerome. Wendy Jerome was a 14-year-old girl who lived in Rochester, New York. She was a friendly, outgoing teenager who loved spending time with her friends and family. On November 22, 1984, Wendy left her home to deliver a birthday card to a friend who lived a few blocks away. However, she never made it to her destination. When Wendy didn't return home that evening, her mother reported her missing to the police. A massive search effort was launched, with volunteers combing the neighborhood and police officers questioning residents. But despite their efforts, Wendy was nowhere to be found. Days turned into weeks, and the Jerome family was left to agonize over their daughter's disappearance. Wendy's mother, Marlene Jerome, made a public appeal for information, saying, Please come forward with any information. Help us bring our daughter home." Finally, on December 4th, 1984, a group of children playing near a school in a neighboring town stumbled upon Wendy's body in a wooded area. She had been brutally beaten and sexually assaulted. The news of Wendy's murder shook the community to its core. The police investigation into Wendy's murder was intense. They interviewed dozens of witnesses, followed up on leads, and collected physical evidence from the crime scene. However, despite their efforts, the case remained unsolved for over 3 decades. In 2017, the Rochester Police Department decided to take another look at the case, hoping that advances in technology might provide new leads. They partnered with Parabon Nanolabs, a company that specializes in DNA phenotyping, to create a composite sketch of the suspect based on DNA evidence found at the crime scene. The composite sketch generated renewed interest in the case, and tips began to pour in. One of those tips led police to Timothy Williams, a 56-year-old man who lived in the Rochester area. Williams had a criminal record, including a conviction for sexual abuse. The tipster was a former acquaintance of Williams. He knew Williams personally and had reportedly observed Williams behaving inappropriately with young girls on several occasions, and had even confronted him about it. The tipster reportedly told Williams that his behavior was unacceptable, but Williams had brushed off the concerns and continued to behave inappropriately. When the news of Wendy Jerome's murder broke, the tipster immediately suspected that Williams might be involved. The tipster contacted the police and shared their concerns, providing specific details about Williams's behavior towards young girls and his potential involvement in the crime. The police took the tip seriously and launched an investigation into Williams, and his DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene.
Well, good afternoon. That breaking news today, an arrest has been made in the 1984 rape and murder of a 14-year-old girl in Rochester, Wendy Jerome. Monroe County District Attorney Sandra Dorley and members of the Rochester Police Department's Major Crimes Unit making that announcement today.
Today we learned that 56-year-old Timothy Williams was arrested in Melbourne, Florida for the alleged rape and murder of Wendy Jerome.
In January 2020, Timothy Williams was arrested and charged with Wendy Jerome's murder. He pleaded not guilty, but was held in custody without bail. The trial began in October 2021 and lasted for several weeks. During the trial, the prosecution presented a strong case against Williams, including DNA evidence, witness testimony, and physical evidence linking him to the crime. The defense argued that the DNA evidence could have been contaminated and that the prosecution had not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Williams was responsible for Wendy's murder. However, the jury ultimately found Williams guilty of second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, and first-degree sexual abuse. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Wendy Jerome's family was finally able to see justice for their daughter after 37 years. Marlene Jerome spoke to the media after the verdict, saying, "We finally got justice for Wendy. I'm just so grateful for everyone who worked on this case, especially the Rochester Police Department. They never gave up on Wendy, and neither did we." The case of Wendy Jerome's murder is a reminder of the importance of perseverance in solving cold cases. Thanks to the dedication of law enforcement and the use of new technology, justice was finally served for Wendy and her family. Number 3, the case of JoAnn Nichols. JoAnn Nichols was a 55-year-old retired school teacher who lived in upstate New York with her husband, James Nichols. She was described by her friends and family as kind, intelligent, and generous. JoAnn had a passion for the arts, and in her retirement she enjoyed painting and playing the piano. On December 21, 1985, James reported his wife JoAnn missing. James told police that his wife had left a note saying she was going to visit her sick mother in Florida. The search for JoAnn Nichols was initiated immediately after her husband, James Nichols, reported her missing. The authorities started the search by scouring the area surrounding their home in Poughkeepsie, New York, but they found no trace of JoAnn. They then expanded the search to other locations, including the nearby Hudson River, but they were still unable to find any evidence of her whereabouts. Despite an extensive search, JoAnn's body was never found, and the case went cold. JoAnn was a beloved member of her community, and her disappearance left many people concerned for her safety. Her family and friends organized search parties and put up posters in the hope of finding her. However, suspicions about James Nichols grew when he refused to take a polygraph test and appeared to be unconcerned about his wife's disappearance. In addition, he was known to have a volatile temper and had a history of domestic violence. The case remained unsolved for nearly 3 decades until 2013, when authorities received a tip that led them to search the couple's home. During the search, they discovered human remains buried in a sealed plastic container in the basement. DNA testing confirmed that the remains were those of JoAnn Nichols. James Nichols was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. During his trial, prosecutors argued that he had killed his wife during a heated argument and then buried her body in the basement. The defense argued that the remains could have been planted and that there was no direct evidence linking Nichols to the murder. The trial lasted for over a month, and during that time the jury heard from witnesses, including James Nichols' former girlfriend, who testified that he had confessed to killing his wife. The prosecution also presented evidence of bloodstains found in the couple's bedroom and evidence of the use of cleaning agents. In the end, the jury found James Nichols guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The case was notable for its use of DNA evidence, which played a critical role in solving the case. The use of DNA evidence in criminal investigations was still in its early stages in the 1980s, and it was not until the early 1990s that DNA testing became widely available. The case also highlighted the challenges of investigating cases where a body has not been found. Without a body, investigators are often forced to rely on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony, which can be difficult to corroborate. JoAnn Nichols was described by her family and friends as a kind, caring, and dedicated teacher who loved her students. Her disappearance and murder were a tragedy that had a profound impact on her community. In the words of JoAnn's sister, "We are grateful that justice has finally been served, but the pain of losing JoAnn will never go away."